Herc, I'm incredibly excited to talk ball with you. This has been in the works for a long time. And first off, I just want to say it's an honor, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Been a big fan of you since your Santos Laguna days.
And I know you guys are from Austin. I just, for the first time ever, visited Austin for the U.S. Versus Saudi Arabia game. I know we spoke about it. You guys were there. I think we were the only 3 people in the stadium. I saw you from afar. I was like, hey, shout out to those who came. But yeah, man, it took me a while, but I'm glad I got to know Austin because Austin's pretty cool.
Let's just get right into it. The U.S. men's national team, that's where I want to start. The beautiful red, white, and blue. You've kind of already alluded to it, man. But post-Gold Cup, as a pure USA fan, I'm left pretty confused. I'm left pretty frustrated. I'm frustrated with the performances on the pitch, the squad selection, the fan attendances that we saw in the Gold Cup. But it looks like the U.S. Soccer Federation is kind of taking note of that. There's a couple campaigns that are trying to push for the U.S. fan to maybe try and rekindle a bit of team spirit. And first off, that first campaign that I've noticed is Nike relaunching the OG vintage 2004 kits. You know the one I'm talking about, with the number right smack dab in the middle and the circle around it. So, Herc, my first question to you is to maybe rekindle a bit of that team spirit. What do you think about those new vintage kits that they're relaunching? Is it dripping or is it tripping?
Little Herc back then would say it's absolutely tripping because Mexico has the same kit. You know, every Nike team had the same kit. It's a cookie cutter kit. For Herc now, big Herc with a family, you know, thinking about nostalgia, like the nostalgic Herc. This was one that I look at it now, going back, and I'm like, yeah, that was kind of hot. You know, that was a fly one. So I'm gonna give it a dripping, just because nostalgic reasons only. But if I go back, like, it's one of probably 20. So, you know, how dripping can it be?
Another campaign, and we already talked about the low attendances at the Gold Cup. It seems like the U.S. Soccer Federation is trying to apologize for that, as they've announced that for the friendlies upcoming in September and October, that they're actually lowering the ticket prices for the supporter section specifically. And I just kind of want to get your take on that. Do you think it's like just a bit of a reach, or do you think this is actually a great way to connect or at least reconnect with U.S. men's national team fans?
I think it's a great first start. Like, let's talk about why attendance is so low. You know, U.S. Soccer be like, hey, man, that's not our event. That's on Concacaf. Concacaf sets the prices. Concacaf markets the games. Concacaf controls everything. That's not our game per se. But it wasn't Mexico's game either. And they constantly show out. It wasn't Guatemala's game either. And they showed out. So it brings me to the other, I guess, factor here, which is the U.S. men's national team is not a very likable team, especially in their own country. And there are many factors for that, whether it's political, whether it's style of play, whether it's unfulfilled potential. This team just hasn't been very well liked. That's not something that happened to previous generations. Like, we were always the underdogs. The U.S. men's national team was always seen as the underdog. So it was easy to root for. The slogan used to be El Equipo de Todos. You know, everyone's team. Like, you could root for Mexico, but you could still cheer for the U.S. You can root for Guatemala, you could still cheer for the U.S. You could be Italian descent and still cheer for the U.S. And that was the motto. Somewhere along the lines, you have a situation where U.S. soccer, I think, is trying to earn back that good faith. People are picking and choosing what they spend their hard-earned dollars on right now for entertainment. That's what it is, entertainment. And if you don't enjoy what you're seeing, you're not going to be entertained. So there's a long way to go. But things like this, it's a $45 ticket max, I believe, fees included, to join in to see the U.S. men's national team. That's a start. The other thing is, you got to start winning. Americans love winners. It's a reality. Listen, I love watching the Olympics. I'm sure you guys do as well. Do you know what's going on the other 3 years that the Olympics aren't going? When it comes to swimming, when it comes to bow and arrow, when it comes to curling, probably not, but you're going to get into it. You're going to get behind it once the tournament starts, especially if there's a winner to root for, especially if there's a dog in your fight there. So I think it's a start, but there's a long way into mending those bridges with the U.S. men's national team and the fans that, quite frankly, previous generations didn't have to deal with. We always had sold out games when I was playing. You know, I'm sure there are factors for that, U.S. soccer deciding where these games are played, but that was never an issue. You played against Mexico, it would be majority Mexican fans if you're anywhere but Columbus, if per se, Ohio, but you would still have fans, and you would still have those Mexican fans that respected the U.S. men's national team and said, hey, this is going to be a tough game.
I really do hope this is at least the start, because, I mean, when I think about the World Cup being literally a year out, or less technically, I just need the fans to show up. Like, we can't ask for the players necessarily to go all the way and win the World Cup. But I think at the very least, hopefully we can ask the fans to show up and support this team, because I think that's the only energy exchange that we can definitely be in control of, is it truly supporting this team. But you're right, there's been so many mistakes from the U.S. Federation, or maybe the coach, or maybe the players' loyalty themselves. And the mistakes are just happening like year to year. It's always something different. There's so many inconsistencies. And now we're in a point where I ask a U.S. men's national team fan at these Gold Cup games, they have no idea how to feel. Like, they're supporting them during the game, and then we ask them how they feel after, and they're just like, yeah, we're trying to support this team, but it's very, very difficult.
Let me ask you a question. Reynoso, for example, while you guys are covering the Mexican national team in the last 5 years, have pretty easily been, in my lifetime, the darkest 5 footballing years for the Mexican national team. You live in the States. You live in Texas, where it's just the Mexican population is overwhelming. Have you seen maybe a dip in the interest of the Mexican national team to that period? If so, you could attribute it to everything we just spoke about with the U.S. men's national team. The failures, the disconnect, the not wanting to root for teams or players who sometimes have actually publicly said they'd rather not play there. They'd rather not play at home, types like this. Have you seen that disconnect?
I guess in moments I did see it, especially like 2-3 years ago when we had lost 2-3 Nations League in a row. I did see a little bit of that disconnect. Like that one uncle who's a casual, a straight casual,
Exactly.
maybe lost a little interest, or you would ask him about the team and you just get these, really negative summaries about what's going on. But there is a culture, there's a tradition of always coming back to the Mexican team. And I think the U.S. really struggles with being able to bring in that type of fan back into the fan base. I'd be curious to ask both of you guys, what percentage of likelihood do you put right now, as of this moment, that the USA games will be fully sold out come World Cup time? Those World Cup matches, do you think it's 100% those are going to be sold out no matter what? Or is there a concern that it'll be like, 70, 80% full?
I'm going to be optimistic here.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's like a 90% chance that we get full USA support come World Cup time. Just because I think World Cup, it's the biggest event in the world when it comes to sports. I think that will try to bring in the casuals, and hopefully if the results are good in the build-up to it, the actual diehards will get more casuals involved as well and show up come the first whistle of the World Cup.
I don't think you're going to get close to 90% in all. There are going to be some markets that will just do well because of the market. I think others are going to struggle. We saw before the 2022 World Cup, Christian Pulisic actually voiced his displeasure at the lack of fans versus Morocco. They beat Morocco 3-1. That same Moroccan side of the same players and a different coach a month later went on and made a semifinal in the World Cup, So it was a very good team that they beat. And people didn't show up in Cincinnati, which is one of the premier markets right now in Major League Soccer. I think people are selective. And I think Mexico and the U.S. hurt each other here because they piggyback off their rivals. I think they have 6 teams that they're playing against, right? 4, if not 5 of the 6 are the same teams they're playing against. So you get this like little whiplash effect where you already saw James play against Mexico, Colombia play against Mexico. Do you really want to go see him play against Mexico or the U.S. here in a more expensive venue, a little further away? Like if you're going to pick where you're going to go type of deal. And you could say, well, I am a diehard U.S. men's national team fan, but I think those diehard fans are outnumbered right now. And quite frankly, priced out, and they have to pick and choose. So I think it's a problem for U.S. soccer going forward. This alliance that they formed, MLS, Liga MX, U.S. Soccer, Mexico, of how they pick and choose these games, I think sometimes they're counterproductive.
That's what makes Concacaf such a interesting region. The fact that Mexico's home games are in the States unless they're World Cup qualifiers, but obviously there's no World Cup qualifying for this cycle for Mexico. So yeah, you really get an interesting situation where the USA has 2 host nations playing constantly when it comes to these friendlies. And yeah, as we've just kind of pointed out, there's just such a cultural difference when it comes to supporting each team. I think it'll just take a long time, but I mean, I think the easiest way to fix that is to just win. Just start winning and just go as hard as you can every single time. If it's Gold Cup, if it's friendlies, I think that's the first thing you have to do as a team to get support behind you. So now I kind of want to take the shift and the focus to the pitch, to the actual analysis of the team now, because we've got some big friendlies coming up. USA's set to face off against AFC's best teams in Korea and Japan, and then as well in October playing one of the most informed teams in South America in Ecuador, and then playing a good Australian team as well. I'm just curious, broad question here, but what are you expecting? What do you want to see from Pochettino, from the squad selection? Like, what do you want to see in these friendlies?
It's crazy, guys, but Mauricio Pochettino was hired in October of last year, and we've never seen a full squad lineup. We've never seen the A-team together. I'm talking about Matt Turner, if you still think that's your starting goalkeeper, Serginho Dest, Anthony Robinson, Chris Richards, and center back 2, whether that's Tim Ream or whoever the case may be, Tyler Adams, a Weston McKennie, whoever is next to them, whether it's Cardoso or Musa, Pulisic, starting 9 like Pepe or Folarin Balogun, and a Timothy Weah. You've not seen that lineup ever. You've not seen them called up. Every single call-up, every single roster drop, there's at least 5 of those players missing from Mauricio Pochettino. And this last Gold Cup roster, there was at least 9 starters missing, and he left 20-plus European-based players that maybe you could say, wow, they're not the greatest players. Like, would they really made a difference? But collectively, you could say they probably make a bit more of a difference than 15 MLS players who have had less than a handful of caps and have never played together. So I'm hoping we get to see somewhat of a first-team lineup, somewhat of a roster that makes us feel good going forward, because you've not seen that. And once you get that roster, like, I want to see it put to practice. Guys, I want to see what $6 million a year gets you. I want to see why Mauricio Pochettino has been referred as one of the top managers in the world for the last 4 or 5 years. Why PSG needed a coach, Pochettino's on the short list. Why Chelsea needed a coach, Pochettino's on the short list. When Man United needs a coach, Pochettino was on the short list. I want to see what that gets you. That's what I'm hoping to see. Now, I think these games are much more valuable than the Gold Cup. I really do. With all due respect to Guatemala, Costa Rica, with all due respect to Haiti, and to Trinidad and Tobago, and with all due respect to Mexico. But playing teams like Japan, South Korea, Ecuador, who you mentioned is on a run right now in South American qualifying, like, that's one of the best defensive teams in the world. I want to see what you can do against that type of opponent, which, quite frankly, may be an opponent you see come World Cup time. You already saw Switzerland and you already saw Turkey. Those could be group play opponents, and they worked you. They absolutely worked you. So I want to see you test yourselves there.
I completely agree. I just want to see our best team that would probably start in the World Cup. I want to see them build momentum, gain confidence, and at least fight against these top teams that you just described. I think it's the only way that I'll feel even remotely good going into the World Cup. But yeah, it has to start with that September friendly. Like, I don't think Pochettino can really mess around with the lineup anymore. I hope he has an idea of who he wants to start at the World Cup, and I hope that those 11 players start in September and then going forward.
Yeah, I just want to see the A-team. I'm just kind of fed up. I want to see the best players show up for their team. I want to see what the max potential of this squad is under Pochettino, because you're right, man. He hasn't really had that chance to fully utilize all the players at his disposal so far. This is it. These are tough opponents, though, man.
Oh, yeah.
These are tough opponents.
It's going to be fun.
With no real chemistry behind the players right now, coming off of a weird Gold Cup where the B, maybe even C team showed up. I'm interested to see how they perform. So it's an important time for the USA. I think these friendlies do matter. And I like your take. They do matter a little bit more than Gold Cup games ultimately.
Yeah, and another point of contention that kind of is revolving around the squad is the Christian Pulisic flack that he got over the summer by deciding not to come to the Gold Cup, not due to an injury, not due to any Milan duties, but literally just to rest. So I want to know your take. Herc, is he irreplaceable for this team? As in, should he immediately start? Should he immediately wear the captain armband outside of Tim Ream, I guess, for the USA come September? Should he? Because Max Allegri at Milan considers him untouchable. Is he untouchable for the U.S. men's national team?
He is on the field. Like, he's going to start. That's Christian Pulisic should be a starter for the U.S. men's national team under Mauricio Pochettino, but he's not untouchable in the sense that you don't take the armband away. And quite frankly, I don't think Christian Pulisic even wants the armband. I don't even think that's his personality. I think Tyler Adams is the leader of that locker room. He's the guy who desperately wants that armband. I don't think it means anything to Christian Pulisic, and I don't think fans should take that in the wrong way. And Mauricio Pochettino, he's already seen what he has. We had Brad Friedel on Vamos last week, and he was saying, I asked him, why leave all these European players off? And he said, I think Mauricio Pochettino knows what he has there. He's gotten a good sense of what that player is about. He doesn't know anything about Major League Soccer. He doesn't know anything about the domestic player. I think he wanted to see that domestic player day in, day out. Well, you've gotten a glimpse of that player. And maybe he's thinking right now, if we really need to do something or want to do something, we got to go a little bit beyond that type of player. Christian Pulisic's going to be, 1A on the call sheet every single time, but he's not untouchable in the sense that, we can see crazy things happen. 2014, Landon Donovan didn't go to the World Cup. Doesn't get any bigger than, at that point in time, than Landon Donovan. He was the face of U.S. soccer and arguably, the best ever in that point. And he was left off by Jurgen Klinsmann. Why? Because he took a sabbatical regardless of the reasons, the circumstances. We understand there are circumstances to it. But he decided that football wasn't his priority and that the team wasn't his priority. In a time of need, I remember being on a cricket field against Antigua and Barbuda. We needed Alan Gordon and Eddie Johnson to come off the bench and save us in the last 10 minutes, or we weren't even going to go to the next round of World Cup qualifying to the Hex. They come on, they save us, and we go to the Hex, and the U.S. completely dominated the Hex with Jurgen Klinsmann. But you were out of the World Cup in that moment. And Landon Donovan wasn't there. He wasn't in the trenches. So there were guys who were in those trenches that Jurgen said, you know what, they'd been around for a while, and I want to reward that. And that's, to me, that's respectable as a player. But I could absolutely, outside looking in, saying, this guy has to be on the team. And I think it's the same with Christian Pulisic.
Yeah, I'm going to be honed in on Pulisic if he plays. Just looking at his mentality, how he's approaching the game, how he's approaching his performance with his teammates. I'm definitely going to be honing in on that because, if the heart just doesn't look there, then yeah, we might see something crazy next year.
But were you bummed that players like Christian Pulisic decided not to play the Gold Cup?
My initial reaction was definitely frustration, and definitely I was just like, what's going on? We're a year out from the World Cup. Why aren't we playing our best team? If Mexico's bringing their best 11, why aren't we doing that? We're hosts. We got to build some sort of chemistry already. And so I was just very confused and frustrated that players like Pulisic just decided not to come. But then I look at the other side. The European season's so long. It's grueling. And when you look at Pulisic as well, he gets targeted in Concacaf. Yeah. He really does. If he plays against Guatemala, Panama, El Salvador, even Mexico, they have specific plans to basically foul Pulisic almost every other time he touches the ball. So he would have a really rough summer in that regard. And so I get the idea that, why not rest just fully over the summer and then have another really good season at Milan and then go off next year at the World Cup. So I see both sides for sure. A spot that is, I think, wide open in my opinion, and I want to know who you think should start or who you would want to see maybe get more playing time is the striker position. We saw Patrick Aguiman get that duty over the Gold Cup. Not a lot of goals from him, but just in general, whoever we put in that position, it's just not scoring right now for the USA. So do you have any, wants or desires to see someone go off in that position?
Wants? I'd love to see Ricardo Pepi come back to the form he was in. I think Ricardo Pepi's been dealt a bad hand when it comes to his U.S. men's national team, playing career. Ricardo Pepi saved Greg Berhalter's job in Honduras, very early on in World Cup qualifying. Besides Christian Pulisic, he was the leading goal scorer of the national team, in that World Cup cycle, and somehow doesn't make the World Cup team. He left Major League Soccer, went and he's trying to play in the Bundesliga with Augsburg, and he doesn't make the World Cup team. And comes back, and whether he starts or he's playing off the bench, he's scoring goals. And he's doing it at PSV, he's scoring in Champions League, and you're thinking this is his moment. And he just kept getting overlooked, and when it was finally, his moment, he got hurt, he got injured. And now we have to wait for him to come back and to see how he is in a wide open race. Farrell Balogun, for all the hype, there has been some hype there, $40 million transfer to Monaco. He's shown flashes at the club level. One game for the U.S. men's national team in Copa America, banger. He scored against Panama with the left foot. Other than that, you're still waiting for him to explode. The number 3, you could say, is Josh Sargent, who I'm a big fan of. But for whatever reason, he can pull together back-to-back, 20 goal campaigns in all competitions in the championship, and he could be their best player for his team in Norwich. But when it comes to the national team, he either can't get on the field, can't stay on the field, and when he gets on the field, stays on the field, can't put the ball in the back of the net. And he's had maybe 6-7 games in the last 5 years, and not many goals to show for it. So you're like, what's going on here? And you guys talked about Christian Pulisic and how you felt about him not playing. Christian Pulisic, I know, had been dealing with like a hip flexor injury, and he asked Milan for time off, and Milan says, we can't give you time off. And Milan are the guys who pay them. That's the entity that pays them. So he's like, okay, had to play through it. He thinks he's got more of a word with the U.S. men's national team in a tournament that he's only played twice. So he says, I want to take this off. Speaks to Pochettino. Pochettino and him weren't, seeing eye to eye, et cetera, but they allowed it to happen. Patrick Agyemang comes and plays this tournament, and he's got a hernia, sports hernia. And sports hernias are extremely painful, and you can't move. And he's a guy that became like the U.S. men's national team's whipping boy at this tournament. Everything wrong with the Major League Soccer player with this. We believe there's an MLS quota type of deal that they have to play on the national team. He became the poster boy for it. And he was getting crushed. And sometimes, it wasn't warranted. Now, he's a very raw forward. Absolutely. He was playing D3. He was playing college ball before, 2.5 years ago. He's just learning what it takes to be a professional. But his skill set, his frame, the speed, he's a handful for any player. Let's see how he does going to the championship. But right now, I think it's an open competition. Do I think Patrick Agyemang is going to be the starter? Absolutely not. But I think he's got a good chance of making a World Cup team because of the guys I mentioned before, they're nowhere near being the clear front runner. Nobody said this is mine. So it's rough, man. The U.S. men's national team, they've never really been in this situation. You've had Josie, when Josie wasn't around, you had Clint who played the 9 position. Before that, you had Brian McBride. Like that's not been a position of concern, or at least I should say, even if it was of concern, there was always one guy that you knew was going to be there. That's not the case right now. So I think it's uncharted territory for the U.S. men's national team.
God, you just made me realize that for the last 5 years, that position has just been cursed. It's been cursed, man. Like every reason you gave for a striker was completely different.
I'm going to blow your mind right now. Daryl Dike, 2 ACLs and countless hammy issues. Jordan Pefok. Jordan Pefok was the second player in the U.S. men's national team pool in its history to win a goal-scoring title outside of the U.S. Behind your boy, right there.
Hey.
I
was like, why do you know that stat?
Man, like that position has just been wide open for the longest time, and it'll continue to be wide open until somebody says, that's mine.
Well, to kind of end this U.S. men's national team talk, I just want to get your general emotional thoughts on what you think is going to happen next year at the World Cup when it comes to this USA squad. Do you think they're going to pull it together? Somehow go off in these friendlies and, give us hope again?
When you think about a Croatia who's already played the last 2 World Cups, they've been in 2 Final Fours in a World Cup final, right? And they've got generational players like Luka Modric. But you see interesting pools like that in Morocco. You see runs like South Korea in Korea. You see runs like Turkey. You see runs in the past, even if we're talking quarterfinals, by teams like Costa Rica, the U.S. men's national team, Sweden, et cetera, et cetera. I'm hoping they can make a run. I see no reason with the player pool alone why they can't be a gritty, spirited, pragmatic, hurt you in transition type of team with the players, if they're healthy, and it's a big if for any national team, right? You want your players healthy. They'll get out of the group. And I think the goal is quarterfinal run and beyond. I was more bullish. I was more optimistic on a post-quarterfinal run a few years back. I would have said if you were ever going to make semis, Final Four in the history of your World Cup, it's in a home World Cup, in home soil, in front of your fans, in a setting that you know. I don't know if that's realistic today, but I think it's quarters is a realistic run. And I think they do it in a way where majority of Americans get behind them and they make it an exciting World Cup. Till this day, the 1994 World Cup is still the most successful World Cup in FIFA's history. I think this will blow it out of the water. And if 1994 changed everything, it spawned like the birth of a domestic league, it inspired millions, including your boy here, to try to play professionally. This is going to be bigger. So there's a lot riding on these players. It's much bigger than Christian Pulisic. It's much bigger than a Weston McKennie. It's much bigger than Mauricio Pochettino. So I'm hoping somewhere along the lines they get it together. At least this is what I want to do together and go forward together and make a run.
Definitely, me too. I look at for example, around the world, and I see a team like Paraguay, for example, who had a terrible Copa America. They're doing terribly in the CONMEBOL qualification. And then all of a sudden, they just went on a 9-game unbeaten streak in CONMEBOL qualifying. The player pool didn't change. Their starting 11 barely changed. It was literally just the mentality, the synchronicity. They just decided, all right, if we want to go to the World Cup, we got to prove it. And the same players pulled it off. And now they're just one of the most informed teams in South America. That's what I'm looking for to give me hope when it comes to this USA squad. The talent's there. I know it's there. We've seen it years ago. And I'm hoping that maybe we just get a little lucky and that return to form occurs over these next 12 months.
All right, let's switch gears to the Mexican national team. Obviously, a very successful summer. The Mexican national team, who I think it's fair to say Reynoso Soltero has been a different team under Javier Aguirre. Maybe not the most progressive team in terms of footballing, a more pragmatic team, but an effective team. A lot of players made the jump with Javier Aguirre. A lot of young players. Mateo Chavez. There's also a Gilberto Mora, who's done very well, who just signed with Rafaela Pimienta. She's the agent of the likes of Erling Haaland, of the likes of Santiago Jimenez. He's a 16-year-old player, who has the potential to make that leap going forward to Europe. There's also Marcel Ruiz, who's taken that leap, of Toluca to the Mexican national team, solidifying himself as a good player. Who has stood out to you guys? I'll start with you, Reynoso. Who stood out to you in the Mexican national team and why this summer?
Before I even get to the players, I think what's so important or what's so amazing as a Mexico fan is that for the first time in a long time, it feels like all those talks that you have on Twitter, all those talks that you have in person with your homies, where you're like, this kid from Toluca, he should definitely get some minutes, man. He's young. He should get that opportunity. Or the idea of a 16-year-old, Gilberto Mora, getting into the starting 11 just sounds ludicrous and doesn't really happen for the Mexican national team if you go based off of these past 10 years. All that finally happened. We finally were able to see a coach make decisions that align with what the fans wanted because they were rooted in actual good decisions, I think. Giving a youngster an opportunity to shine like Gilberto Mora, giving Marcel Ruiz the keys to the midfield alongside Edson Alvarez, and then having players up top like Raul Jimenez going through his resurgence, I think is a big part of Mexico's success. But honestly, if I'm going to focus on a sector of the pitch, under Javier Aguirre, it has to be our defense, man. The defense has been so good, so consistent, so reliable. Cesar Montes and Johan Vazquez have played at the best pair in CONCACAF, and they are just continuing to get better. They're playing well at club level too. And I really like how Aguirre has honed into them, has really made them the important part of this team, almost our identity, because we're not a high goal scoring type of team anymore. Instead, we just have a really good, reliable defense to give us that foundation to then go and win 1-0, 2-0, and get the results. So that to me is the biggest takeaway so far.
I couldn't agree more. That center back duo, Cesar Montes, Johan Vazquez, is here to stay, and they've been doing extremely well. I think it's the outsides that are the question marks, right? It's the left back, it's the right back. Who is it? Is it Jorge Sanchez? Is it Kevin Alvarez coming back in? Is it Israel Reyes who slots over to the right? Or is it Julian Araujo, the Mexican-American, who starts the quarterfinal and the semifinal, but for the life of me, I don't know why he didn't even dress for the final. What did you guys make of that?
It did surprise me, but at the same time, what I do like about Aguirre is that he does make bold moves in real time. He doesn't wait for a tournament to be over. We saw Mora get included as a starter kind of midway through the tournament. And I actually kind of applaud Aguirre for making these changes, though, because it's what the USA haven't really done is start off with a really good base of players and then add in players that have found good form either with the team or at club level. And that's what really stood out to me for Mexico is actually those midfield inclusions, because it used to be so defensive with Edson Alvarez, Charlie Rodriguez, and Luis Romo as our starting midfielder for Mexico. But now in this tournament, we saw Aguirre just change that finally. People have been begging for more creative midfielders, and Aguirre actually pulled that off with Marcel Ruiz being the starting midfielder alongside Edson Alvarez, and then Mora coming in mid-tournament and honestly being probably one of the most brightest players Mexico had in the semifinal and final. So I really applaud Aguirre for constantly changing this team.
Julian Araujo, he's a friend of the podcast on Vamos. I messaged him right when I found that out. I was like, hey, you got to be injured, right? And I applaud the kid's mentality. He's like, that's just football. And he had like such a, I got to keep moving forward type of mentality about it, which I applaud. I couldn't agree more about the midfield, man. When you look at Javier Aguirre and what he's been historically, he's pragmatic. And all of a sudden he gets a little creative. There's a little wrinkle. That to me screams Rafa Marquez, who's his assistant coach right there. That's Rafa Marquez adding his own element, his own wrinkle. Last World Cup cycle, that wrinkle was Luis Chavez. Luis Travis was a sleeper pick. Like, it's a guy who came out of nowhere and not only made an impression, but made an impression at the World Cup. Scored a golazo, a banger against Saudi Arabia, one of the few bright spots that Mexico had in that World Cup. Do you see any sleepers here? Is there a pick you'd say, you know what, this guy right now, maybe not making a name for himself, but I could see him being an important part in the World Cup. Somebody that you've seen maybe in this Gold Cup, or you see, you know what, I'm still waiting for him to explode. He could be a big sleeper.
Because of our current situation at wing, I think with Roberto Alvarado and Alexis Vega, I think Alexis Vega has been in a little bit better form as of recently. Alvarado didn't shine the way a lot of people hoped he would. He was still very good, but I feel like there's an opening there for a Mexican winger to really show out. And if you have a Mexican winger going off at the club level leading into the World Cup, there's definitely a chance that they could make a name for themselves and get the opportunity to shine at the World Cup. One name that I have in mind is a winger for Chivas called Hugo Camberos, who has been really good in this past season. The numbers aren't there yet, and obviously he's playing alongside Roberto Alvarado, but I like his electricity. I like his energy. I like kind of what he represents. Also, a young winger. It's nice to have. And I think if he has a good season with this Liga MX season that's underway already, if it's a good season and does it again, there's definitely a chance for a surprise there at winger with Hugo Camberos. So that's a player that I think I would love to see get the opportunity.
He's also the oldest looking teenager I've ever seen in my life. But
I know, right? I was struggling to describe him just now because I'm like trying to hype up the youth, but he looks like he's 40, bro.
But he plays like a baller. He is fast. He is tricky. How about you, Soltero?
For me, it actually is Mateo Chavez, who we saw get included in this Gold Cup. I love fullback positions. It's my favorite position, so maybe there's a little bit of bias here. But the reason why I really like Chavez is he's very technical, very raw for sure. But I think he's going to really hone in on his technical skills over in the Netherlands with AZ Alkmaar. We saw a couple years ago in that same position at Alkmaar, Milos Kerkez go off, and now he just got a big money move to Liverpool. I think Chavez definitely has the right foundation to be successful in Europe. I mean, just off of these few appearances in the Gold Cup, you can really tell that he really is pass first. He's focused on the technical idea of the game rather than the physical. And also just the fact that you already alluded to, Herc, is those wing positions in those fullbacks, a little questionable right now for Mexico. Gallardo's just not the exact same player that he was over these last 4 or 5 years. And I think a more technical player like Chavez could be very successful there, especially if he has a good season in Europe this year.
Yeah, especially because Gerardo Arteaga's fallen off the map. I don't even know where that kid is right now. But I love that you brought up the foundation and how technical he is. He reminds me of Santi Jimenez, not in the technical ability, but the foundation. Santi's dad plays, so he knows what it's about. It's kind of guided him. Mateo Chavez's dad also played, long-time Liga MX, player, long tradition, very technical player. So they've got a good foundation and know what they want. I think that's good going forward. There's a guy who I've been very impressed with. Started off as a young player in Querétaro, then goes to Tijuana, and then goes to Toluca. And everywhere he's been doing just solid. He's been getting better, and he's been a solid player. That's Marcel Ruiz. Marcel Ruiz was easily a standout player in Liga MX this year, scored some bangers. And it surprises me how Mexico works, how Liga MX works, because in my time playing in Liga MX, you had to have multiple seasons in order to be considered for the national team, like good multiple seasons. I played with a guy named Guti Estrada, a right back at Santos, and he won the Balón de Oro, I should say, 5 different times. And he's got like one cap to his name, one appearance with the Mexican national team. It was very difficult. Guys have a good season or two, and they get thrust into the limelight, and you're getting all kinds of crazy offers. We've seen this tug of war, and I'm not saying Marcel doesn't deserve the recognition. I actually think he does. But we're seeing a crazy tug of war right now between young Mexican players and the ownerships in letting them go. Ipswich Town of the championship was interested. We've heard mixed reports of who turned it down, whether it was Marcel Ruiz or Toluca, but they turned it down. Palmeiras is interested now, the Brazilian giant, in Marcel Ruiz because Richard Rios left, and there's an opening there. And they've turned that down as well. I'm curious your guys' thoughts and what you make of it. What do you make of, one, Marcel and his astronomic rise, and two, the situation of him not making that jump yet? He's 24 years old.
I think it's interesting because this one has an added layer of, I think Toluca is hesitant to let him go because they're title hopes do, I think, rely a lot on Marcel Ruiz specifically being in that midfield. When you see Cruz Azul getting stronger, making crazy moves in the transfer market, when you see America spending money as always, you want to retain that dominance that they showcased last season, winning the championship. To do it again, I do think they have to have Marcel Ruiz in that midfield. So that's an added layer on top of it, because sometimes, you'll have like Eric Sanchez, for example, was at Pachuca, but Pachuca wasn't a title-winning type of team, and they ended up giving him off to America. Still, they were hesitant to loan him off or to send him off to Europe. That was a bad move overall, but they weren't title contenders the way I think Toluca is right now. And so that's an interesting layer that you add on to this story, Marcel Ruiz, because I do think he needs to be looking to go elsewhere now. The conversation started 2-3 seasons ago about him potentially making a move. He then backs it up by having incredible seasons with Toluca, and now has become a champion. It's the perfect time, especially after the Gold Cup. It's the perfect time to make the move. So I'm adamant that he has to make the move this season. There's no point in postponing it. He's also about 24 years old, I believe. So the age is perfect. The timing is now. Let's go to Europe, Marcel.
Would y'all genuinely be happy with a move to the championship, though? Like, would that actually be the move you would want to see Ruiz make?
I see the discourse online of, bro, it's the championship. Bro, it's Brazil. There's this way of thinking where top 5 is the only thing that matters. It's the Premier League, it's La Liga, it's the Bundesliga, Serie A, and it's France. And even if it is France, it's a farmers league type of talk. Players can't be better versions of themselves in a Palmeiras. By the way, Richo Rios, who's leaving Palmeiras right now to go to Europe, who potentially Marcel Ruiz could replace, was in Mazatlan a few years ago. It's all about making the proper adjustments to being a better footballer, and the world will see you. The same way people scoff at the championship, which I think is a top 10 league in the world and a very difficult league with a lot of money, is the same way a lot of people would scoff, probably would scoff even more, at Toluca. Major League Soccer, Liga MX, the rest of the world views us as exotic locations. And that's okay, because we know the type of talent that, resides here. I think going to a championship or a Brazilian league team like Palmeiras is an excellent move for a player like Marcel Ruiz in terms of development. But I could definitely see the discourse and the why people would discredit that.
I think when it comes to those two leagues, I would definitely prefer Brazil over the championship. England's very, very physical, and I'm not saying Marcel Ruiz couldn't handle it, but I feel more secure about his path in Brazil, seeing what guys like Johnny Cardoso, for example, did with Internacional. I would kind of mirror that sort of path, where he then had a couple years, 3 years, really good years with Internacional, makes the move to Real Betis. I think that would be a great way to prep Marcel Ruiz at an even bigger Brazilian club,
right,
with a club with a lot of stakes, a lot of fans. To be able to be positioned in that midfield and get into it would be a remarkable feat for the Mexican. But then I think the profile, the setup would be really good as well, to then be able to make the move to a bigger club in Europe rather than going to a championship, a French league, or the Netherlands. I think that would be the ideal path at the end of the day for Marcel Ruiz. And I also think the profile, I think his style of play would fit better in Brazil than it would in the championship.
Yeah, he's a crafty player. He's got a good skill set, good technique, good two-way player, but he's physically pretty big. He's a tall kid. He's lanky, he's fast. I think he could play in both, honestly. The one thing I love about both situations is the platform. One is the best league in the Americas, which is the Brazilian league, and you constantly see European teams, plucking from there. And the other is the championship, where you're constantly going to be in the eye of the best teams in the world, like the Premier League. So I could see both being good situations for him. I just want to see him leave. I think that's one of the important things here is Mexican soccer. We so often hear how the teams hold the players back, how they don't sell them. I'm hoping the case is they sell him and the player wants to leave. A lot of star power coming to Liga MX right now. I mean, it's been quite some time. It's been quite some time. We can go through the names right here. There's Keylor Navas. There's Sergio Ramos. There's Angel Correa. James Rodriguez.
Aaron Ramsey.
There's all kinds of crazy talent coming to Liga MX, which is, I want to say, new to Liga MX. You've always had good talent coming to Liga MX, but big names like that, but that was like Major League Soccer. On the tail end of the career, or big names you can get, that was on the tail end of the career. Major League Soccer, you have Messi, you've got Busquets, you've got Jordi Alba, Rodrigo de Paul. Very easy, very simple question. Which league can attract more talent? Which league is more attractive for talent?
My first thought just goes to the MLS simply because of the locations. Like you just hear LA. Okay, if you're born in Tokyo, you know what LA is, right? You think New York City, Miami. These are like international cities. Whereas I say Mexico only has one real international city, at least globally, which is Mexico City. So I would just say from that infrastructural point of view, I would say the MLS is more attractive to, let's just say, the casual European star.
I think it's MLS now. What's more attractive, especially with Messi's presence in the league and the way that they cover him. The pitches, I think, are a little bit more nicer in MLS. I think the money that's being driven into the league is more promising. I think, though, there is something, though, that is bringing in these players to Liga MX, which I still think is a competitive level of football in North America that maybe doesn't exist in the MLS.
Yeah.
And I think that allure does have a strong power to free agents. It's, I think Keylor Navas is a crazy get, especially. Like, that's a big name for Pumas to acquire. Incredible. But I do think it's because he still wants to play competitive football, be in North America, but doesn't want to, go through all the ups and downs of an MLS type season. Instead, you get to go to the Liga MX, compete with some of the biggest clubs, and win silverware potentially. So I think there's different aspects to both leagues, but overall, I would say MLS probably more attractive now.
If you look at the type of player that comes, that top tier talent, probably not going to Liga MX. And it's because he's not looking for a competitive league. He's not looking for to still feel the football in his blood day in, day out. He's looking for Miami. He's looking for his family's well-being. He's looking for other things besides football. But there are the likes of the mid-tier and higher talent who still want to feel what it's like to play in a do-or-die situation, in a footballing setting, and get paid well. Liga MX is net. MLS is gross. So you're going to have taxes on the MLS side. And listen, I moved out to Connecticut from California. Half my paycheck was over there. so there's that aspect of it. But when it comes to who can attract more, it depends what talent you're looking for. If you're looking for the top tier talent, they're going to win out in Major League Soccer. But that talent who wants to see a stepping stone, a trampoline, and get paid well, very much well can pick Liga MX for a variety of reasons. It's a good time to be a Concacaf fan when it comes to Liga MX and MLS with the star power we have. If we had to access El Gigante de Concacaf, the Concacaf giant at the moment, if we had to go a ranking of 5 till we get to that giant, how are we going and why? Start with number 5.
Does Guatemala get into the top 5? They were a top 4 team at Gold Cup. Is that enough to get into the top 5?
I have Guatemala at 5. I think the performance of the Gold Cup, honestly, for their second time in a row, they've really progressed over these last 3 years. I thought they play really exciting football, but also more importantly, they play really good team football. It's not an accident that Guatemala almost made the final. And I think if you just compare them to the rest of Central America, maybe outside of Panama, spoiler alert, and the rest of the Caribbean, especially with the massive failures of Jamaica, for example, I think Guatemala is definitely, for me, in that 5th spot.
I think we're all in agreement. There's 3 teams that could fight for that top 5. It's Guatemala, it's Jamaica, and Costa Rica. Who are you going with number 5?
I guess I'll give love to Costa Rica. I'll give them their love. They almost knocked out the USA squad, and similar to Guatemala, they just play a good, reliable style of football, man. Even though they are limited in certain aspects, I would say Guatemala is more free with the skill and talented players that they have. But Costa Rica with Miguel Herrera, I think, does have potential against that top 5. They're always a fight. They're always a threat. Yeah. They're annoying to play against. I think they got to make it into that number 5 position. Happy with Guatemala, though, because of what they represent in the fans.
I'm going to hate myself, but I'm going with Jamaica. If there's one nation right now in CONCACAF that has unlimited possibilities because of the dual nationals and who they could recruit and who they could bring on board, like the type of star power, it's just too much talent for me to ignore. They got more talent than the other team outside the top 3, and they've always let me down. But I will go with Jamaica.
But at number 4, I'm going Canada. I think the way they showed out in this Gold Cup was very disappointing. I think the momentum that they carry right now at this moment is very negative. And I just think it was a failure at the end of the day, what they went through, the way the players played, the downfall of Schafferberg even, man. Like, the most exciting players aren't showing out. And not having Alphonso Davies was a big part of it, and also missing a few key players. But overall, I think right now, as of this moment, Canada is in 4th place due to that Gold Cup performance, man.
I'm putting Panama at 4, just simply because I do think this Panamanian team has a ceiling. And I think that ceiling usually becomes very apparent when they play Canada USA, Mexico, recently they've had some success, but I would like to see it maybe more on a year-to-year basis. But I think if you are Panamanian, though, you are incredibly excited about this team. I think 4 is like the best they've ever been, and they've been, for me, at this 4 position for the last 3 straight years, and it's all due to Thomas Christiansen and his consistency and momentum that he's built with his Panamanian side. Their starting 11, if fully healthy, can go toe-to-toe with Mexico, USA, and Canada. So that's what makes this team very, very exciting. I put them at 4.
Yeah, I love what you said about the ceiling. And if there's one team that plays to that ceiling constantly, it is Panama. Because of Thomas Christensen, because of how he's implemented a style, a DNA, there's a culture there. I just think ultimately talent will win out. And there are circumstantial games that we can go through of why they've beaten other different teams. But if we're talking about program right now, I think they're the 4th best program, which hurts because I absolutely love to watch them play.
3 for me has to be Panama. I think that they had one of the biggest absences at the Gold Cup, not having Carrasquilla with them. If they had him, I think that's a different type of performance. So I'm going to go Panama 3.
I'm going to go Canada 3. I'm just a little flip-flop here. Reason why I'm putting Canada 3 is just I can't, kind of similar to your Jamaica take, I just can't ignore some of the top tier talent that this side possesses, considering that they'll also be hosts. Yes, they've been inconsistent, but the way they showed out at the Copa America literally just a year ago, I think is very promising. They were missing some big players in Gold Cup. That's why I'll put them at 3.
Number 3, I'm going to go with the U.S. men's national team. And it's tough here because I'm splitting hairs. It's like when you decide between the 3, Canada, the U.S., Mexico, it's like you're trying to decide between who the tallest Smurf is. So it's difficult here. But I look at the U.S. men's national team, and it's very difficult for me to, with a straight face, just sit here and say, but look at the player pool. But look at the player pool. When they've let you down in countless tournaments, whether that's BC team, type of tournaments that they play with the Gold Cup, whether that's the Nations League where they no-showed. Regardless of the situation, the circumstances, the players that have been available to the U.S. men's national team, the Copa America failure, where they became one of the first host countries to bow out in the group phase. Not even Bolivia did that. They did that, the U.S. men's national team. It's hard for me with a straight face to go on here and say, hey, they're better than 2 or 3. I don't see that right now. I think they showed who they are when they've played, regardless of what had happened. So you have to say this is where they deserve to be. Can they be better? Absolutely. But I've got them at 3 right now.
I think you kind of know what this USA team is, and it's just tough to ignore what's happened so far. It's been a lot of bad, negative moments, which is why I end up putting them at 2, because despite the negativity around the team, they still make it to a Gold Cup final. They still have really good players. They still have potential. I wouldn't be surprised if they figure out the mess that they're in right now and build a little bit of momentum, whereas I would be a little bit more surprised if Canada or Panama are able to do that. So for me, the USA is number 2, but with a pretty large gap between them and the number 1 team.
I have the exact same take. I don't have much to add there. I can't even disagree with anything you said either, Herc. But I'm still just going to put them at 2 simply because of the decent Gold Cup performance, considering it was even a B team. So the fact that we made the final was great. And the rest is just pure optimism and hope.
I think my number 2 here, and it's a difficult decision because I think all 3 programs are in a bit of a flux right now. An identity crisis. They're trying to regain their form, their identity. But I'm going to go with the Mexican national team. I think Mexico is a team that you look at what they have going for themselves. They've got la afición. They got the public. And playing at home and playing in Texas in the next round and potentially going forward in the quarters and beyond, they'll have more of a home setting is going to be massive. But this is easily one of the worst generation of Mexican players that I can remember. The player pool isn't as great. You've got players that we hope can take that next step. Mateo Chavez, Gilberto Mora, players like Marcel Ruiz, Cesar Huerta. Can he take that jump? Can he be that player in Europe? But we've not seen that yet. What we have seen is players that, are frustrated when they play against higher opposition, are frustrated when they play, away from home, whether that's the U.S. setting or Mexico setting. I think there's a ceiling to this team, and there's a ceiling to their manager. Their manager's got one way of playing. It's pragmatic. When he goes against better opposition, I think he reverts to who he is, and that scares me for Mexico. I've seen his mistakes, come World Cup time from Javier Aguirre, so I'm going to put them at 2.
Wow. Heavy words there, Herc. Heavy words, but that transitions me perfectly to my number 1 pick, which is Mexico, which I'll basically mirror what you said, the complete opposite. The complete opposite. I'm very high on the coach, on his adaptability. I think it's a new Javier Aguirre. I think he's an old man who's learned his ways. He's managed so much, and he's realized, you know what? I need to adapt to the modern game. I'm going to do that with this Mexican national team.
Oof.
And now I got Rafa Marquez with me,
Yeah,
one of
that's
the
a good
greatest
point.
leaders of all time, helping me out. More limitations here than what we had in the 2010s with that crazy front three of Chicharito, Giovanni Dos Santos, Carlos Vela, Hector Herrera, Andres Guardado in the midfield. These were big names, big game players. I don't know if we have that, so I agree. There's a limitation on the team. I'm just more optimistic on what we can do with Javier Aguirre, the way he utilizes us, the tactics, the way we play, and the fact that he gets results, as we've seen under his tenure, winning big games for Mexico so far in the Gold Cup and finally defeating USA after losing to them so many times for the past 6 years.
Yeah, I agree. The talent pool and quality is definitely low right now for Mexico. But the reason why I have that number one is because of the identity that Aguirre has established with his size. It's consistent. Yes, it is very pragmatic. I wish they did play maybe a little bit more of a fun offensive style of football. But I think right now, in a grind game where it's end-to-end, 0-0, going into the 80th minute, I would actually trust Mexico's pragmatism to somehow find a result. Whereas I see Canada and the USA low-key just kind of crushing under the pressure right now. And I just really like that defensive identity that Mexico has. I would trust them more in a really pressurized situation.
I'm glad you brought up trust, and that's the problem I have with Mexico right now is, do I trust Luis Angel Malagon? I think he's low on confidence right now. I think he's a goalkeeper that physically can get imposed. Do I trust that Raul Jimenez at 34, turning 35 years of age at the World Cup will still be the same Raul Jimenez a year from now? I don't know. Do I trust that Santi Jimenez is going to finally explode and be that player we hope he can be? I'm hoping so, but that's a lot of hope, right? So there's a lot of question marks there to that trust. I trust Jesse Marsch. I trust the Canadian national team a little bit more. Soccer, football, it's about the players, and they have players right now. They got young players, dynamic players. They've got players who individually can create for themselves. They got players who, if they're asked to press the way Jesse Marsch wants them to press, can physically do it. They're pragmatic. And these type of teams, and we've seen it at the Copa America, they do well. They were in Argentina's group. They got out. They made it to a third-place game. I actually trust Jesse Marsch and this Canadian national team a bit more. I talk about Concacaf's best players. Jonathan Davis is the best 9 in the region. You know, Alphonso Davies, I know he tore his ACL, but if he's back anywhere near his optimum level, he's one of the best defenders. He's one of the best players going forward in open space. You know, you've got Kone, you've got, good players. Not going to make waves at the World Cup, but they're going to be a difficult team to play against. I just trust this team a bit more in a tournament setting, and I think they're more adapted to a tournament setting. I've got less question marks about this team, if I'm being honest. That's why Canada's my number one. Can they defraud me like they did in the Gold Cup? Absolutely. And excuses are excuses, but I could sit here and say, well, they were winning that game until Jacob Schaffelberg, got that dumb red card. And who knows, Guatemala did what Guatemala should do and took advantage of it, and Guatemala deserves all the credit in the world. But games like that are circumstantial for me. There's meaning to it. So I just trust Canada a bit more.
Fair enough. I think we'll have to prove it once again at the World Cup. Mexico
That's the thing.
going on a run, or who knows, the host nations of USA,
There we
Canada
go.
do have the same opportunity.
Yeah.
Herc, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm excited to do this more with you. And we were just really excited about this collaboration. Always seen you, always watched your work. So just thank you for this, man. And that was really, really fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun to be with the Give and Go. I've always seen you guys online. You guys absolutely crush it. Next time I'm in Austin, I'm going to give you guys a shout. You got to show me where all the good taco spots
Let's
are.
talk.
Because,
Oh,
yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Let's eat up.
Guys, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.